24 هي اللي بتتكلم فيها. الآن وش اللي بتمشي فيها بسرعة؟ 19 بعدين عندك الباقي اللي تبع المثال 21 22 23 24 تلاقيهم سريع إلى 24.
Peace be upon you all. Would like to welcome you to this virtual meeting. Honored and excited to have you all on board to further speak about the second virtual workshop among the road to Riyadh, to further speak about developing the record about the customer prices known as inflation, which is of course part and parcel of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia hosting the UN Data Conference 2026 in Riyadh in November this year. Before we start, let's pause a moment for one question which is very important for everyone in society, which is about consumption and spending, how much we see the differences in prices in our everyday life, and our purchasing power has been changed in the past in comparison with the past. These questions lead us to a very important topic, which is about the record of the customer prices, which is a very important tool to better understand the movement and activity of markets, and also measure the activities methodologically and accurately. We will have today in this virtual meeting this presentation, which showcases the activities and abilities of the G-Stat to better understand inflation and customer prices, to better understand the economic situation and make decisions based on data, robust data. Honored and excited to have His Excellency Abdulaziz bin Sheikh, the head of the customer prices, who will walk us through the most important side and dimensions starting from the key definitions terms all the way up to the practical applications in a depth. Mr. Abdulaziz, welcome on board. Dr. Mia, thank you so much. Excited and honored to be with you and also to be among the... So before we get started, of course, is it possible to define what is meant by the record of the customer prices and the periodicals? Of course, Dr. Miad, first and foremost, the record of the customer prices in simple terms is a statistical measurement to better understand the prices of customers in terms of commodities, services, which represent, of course, the spending. Why this is very important? Because it is based on different prices for this basket over a period of time in comparison with the previous period of time or reference time. The GSTAT, of course, publishes the results of the index, of course, at the GSTAT website. Thank you so much, Mr. Abdulaziz. Could you walk us through also how such services and commodities or goods are selected for the customer prices? Well, the customers and commodities, when it comes to the customer basket, are selected based on the field survey results, based on household. The data and the patterns of spending are analyzed across different items of consumption. Then certain items are selected which make up part and parcel of the households and of course provide and accommodate their daily needs. The baskets are revisited periodically to better understand the social and socio-economic changes. Also, baskets should be priceable and should be made available across the different sales points, across the different geographical regions of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, with fair representation of all the social segments. Thank you so much, Mr. Abdulaziz. If we are good to go to better understand the theme by looking into the activities and efforts of the GSTAT to develop the indicators and better understand why this regular update is always there to better understand the inflation indices journey. Thank you so much, Dr. Miad, for this introduction. Peace be upon you all. Welcome all, honored and excited through the coming meetings to better walk you through a detailed presentation about the journey of the GSTAT to develop the index of the index of the customer prices. I will walk you through the great efforts made by the GSTAT, which resulted in updating the index all the way from 2023 and publishing the index based on the adopted methodology starting from September last year, 2025. Hoping that the presentation will be up to your expectations and will be of great importance to you in such a way to showcase the sides of development taken or considered. First, I will speak about the general efforts of GSTAT to develop the index based on the roles of the GSTAT in developing the statistical work in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and based on the strategy which includes, of course, providing accurate and updated statistics. The GSTAT conducted a holistic review for the customer prices, including identifying the baskets and the weights, developing the data collection methodology, covering geographical areas, in addition to other development aspect consideration will be considering, of course, over the presentation in order to enhance the quality of the results based on the best practices globally, and also providing well-defined outcomes for the customers and enhance the transparency, and also helps the decision makers relating to the reasons why we are updating the index. The most important reasons of which is to enhance the statistical methodologies, enhancing the competencies of the consumers' weights by updating the weights of the consumers and the baskets, which reflects, of course, the public spending in addition to the holistic data and the accuracy of the data collected. Let's walk you through the reasons, the rationale of the customer spending, the accuracy of inflation data that are updated, of course, will reflect the increase of the inflation, coping up. Also, it helps to cope up and cause for coping up the consumption patterns, changing the habits, given different considerations as like social patterns, economical patterns, such as, for example, depending on delivery applications and purchasing on different behaviors, in addition to different patterns or behaviors that are different from one year to another. Equally important, contributing, of course, to general spending, enhancing the accuracy of the data in order to measure the economic and the social behavior and performance, in addition to the global and benchmarking or comparison, in addition to best practices, where of course we conduct a benchmarking for the to better understand the socio-economic behaviors. In addition, that this will be a good point to depend on in terms of the financial, social, economic and fiscal policies. Relating to the benchmarking, we have looked into the best practices of the G20 countries, which go in line with the international guidelines that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has joined to the countries that apply the best practices in terms of measuring the weights based on the consumer index, of course, what was published 2020, by adopting a baseline year based on, rather than just like a fixed year, updating the weights periodically, yearly, rather than 5 years, in addition to depending on different sources of data rather than depending on field surveys only. A general idea about the index will start from looking into the development, the historical development of the consumer basket. We started that in 1980, sorry. We covered only 220, while we walked all the way and we developed 1999, 2007, 2013, 2018 and 2030. Of course, we have included both vertically and horizontally, including more and more of the basket items, like more than 582 items, and covering the whole regions of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This slide talks about the relationship between quantities and the prices. Of course, prices are affected by different reasons, such as competitiveness, monopolies, and the government policies. Quantities are impacted and affected by different factors, such as, for example, the demographic composition, the consumer preferences, and the development of customer commodities and the services, in terms of like the relationship between prices and commodities. Well, it depends on, of course, different reasons and different matrices. Moving ahead to further speak about inflation index, by better understanding the drivers, the impacting influential drivers that impact the consumers' behaviors. We see the most important drivers include, of course, the income, the government spending, the nature of the private sector, in addition to the monetary policies such as like interest rates. While at the same time, the drivers that impact the technical side, such as, for example, investment, labor force, supply chain, supply and demand, decisions made recently, of course, relating to the real estate regulations and balance. Speaking of the technical sides in terms of the development of the index, the next slide talks about the technical considerations when it comes to building or developing the index of the record. The prices of the consumer baskets reflects, of course, the behaviors of society members. The steps of the development, of course, includes the following: selecting the items of the consumer baskets, which reflects, of course, the preferences and the behaviors; classifying and sorting out the items based on groups, subgroups, and items or sub-items, giving them weights based on the volume of spending of each item, and also collecting and following or tracking the items in the field, in addition to other records. on the side, on the left side, of course, reflects the development stages of the consumer behavior that ends up the data collection stage. The GSTAT, of course, considered different guidelines based on the best practices and guidelines. We have taken into consideration 6 criteria, including, of course, 3 which are very important relating to the development of the basket, such as, for example, based on the services and the commodities, based on how much the basket can be updated and traceable. In addition, we have also taken 3 factors into consideration, such as ensuring the consistency of the data, data collection, also ensuring the quality of data, and also the seasonality of the data and the seasonality of the items to be purchased or consumed. Relating to the technical side that the GSTAT has worked to develop the index, we have worked, of course, different stages, such as, for example, the updating the sample, the development of the data collection, diversifying the sources of data, the development of the data to be processed, updating the weights of the baskets, and also extracting the results based on the weights considered. Moving ahead to speak about the different detailed development. Of course, we focus on different primary stages, which is like the design of the sample and the data collection mechanism, where first, of course, we updated the mechanism while increasing the sales points 165%, and also this is, of course, to have like more holistic data. We also worked on the coverage, of course, up to 80% in addition to the field service. We also worked on the review of the coverage to include more residential areas and also reflects the household consumption. These also includes the different stages, which is, of course, diversifying the data resources in order to ensure the high quality of the data. We use different methods in order to collect data, such as different sales points, in addition to the records and logs, in order to ensure that the data are holistic and representative. We have used different resources when we developed weights, such as, for example, the household income in 2023, and also the consumption data of the household based on the national income, in addition to other records and logs, which of course helped us to better have like fair representation of the income and of the household income. This is, of course, to ensure the quality of the data and also enhancing the mechanism used. One final point, the work, of course, stages included methodology, classification, and the result calculation. Speaking of the methodology, of course, we depended on the Consumer Price Index manual issued by the IMF in 2020, which is considered the most updated reference. Speaking of the classification, of course, we adopted the best classification model known as QuakeUp 2018 as one classified or standardized classifier in order to enhance accuracy and detail. Speaking of the results, of course, we calculated results based on 23 cities rather than 16 cities, and the publication, of course, is considered to be across the whole 13 regions of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Speaking the mobile chain methodology, of course, or the CPI and how they are updated. First, speaking of the CPI, it is a way to calculate, which is, of course, depends on updating the weights every year rather than depending on like a baseline or a fixed year. Each year is fixed or pegged to a certain CPI. We have different, of course, different features, such as like flexibility, which reflects the household income and spending. Also, it provides high levels of accuracy because the weights, of course, reflect the real income and the real spending, and avoid any bias. Speaking also, the global guidelines are references in order to link the consumer behavior and the spending based by, which of course reflects the behavior, the good, well-detailed behavior of the consumers. This is the well-detailed, of course, the CPIs. As you see here, this is like the past period and the current period and the next period. The past period, of course, as of 2013, to link this to the CPI, where, of course, we're dependent on the weights in terms of the household income and spending as of 2013. From 2013 all the way up to 2016, as you see here, we used the weights, of course, based on the household spending to link, of course, the weights from 2018 all the way up to 2023. As for this kind of update, which where of calculation will be based on, so the weights are calculated based on the results of the household spending in 2023. Also, these weights have been updated based on the results of the final or total household spending, which are, of course, made available, and they are the bedrock of adopting the CPIs. Speaking of the weights of 2024 and 2025, is the same mechanism depending on the, of course, baseline year 2023. As for 2026, weights are calculated based on the previous 2 years, but given the data of the previous prices, so we adopted the fixed or the identified prices. In the future, as for 2027 and 2028, it will be the same as in 2026. But again, in 2028, we will benefit from the results of the household spending, which will be, of course, completed in 2026. As you see here in red, the classification of services and commodities based on the most updated guide, of course, 2028. The next slide. We will look into the steps of updating the CPI, which is considered a very important process which aims to maintain accuracy and data. In this example, we see we have color rows for 3 segments: 2021, 2023, and 2024, each in a different color, of course, based on CPI through 3 steps, as you see on the right, 5 and 6 and 7, in addition to 8 columns, as you see. The first step, we adopted the matrix to calculate the index, which of course can be seen here in the price increase based on the power of the weights, in of course including all the basket items, and the results are used also in column 4, 5, and 6. The second step, of course, we cannot compare the results directly when we change the baseline years, when we come to link the CPIs, and these of course are calculated based on comparing December and January, as you see here in column 7. The final step of the CPI is to bring the results back to one fixed year, 2023, where the value is up to 100, so that we can have the results comparable, whether 2023 or 24 or 23, and this stage is of course developed by the average of 2025, and then we multiply the results by 100. This is the final result based on time series, which reflects, of course, the results without being impacted by the fixed or the baseline year. This is a graph that represents for 2 years before we use the CPI, which shows that there is a gap between the different years because of the different weights. This slide shows how we can pick or link two indices in 2023 and 2022 in December and January, as you see here, 99.1. This is the graph, as you see here in the dotted blue line, 2022 and 2023, after linking them based on the CPI, and the gap is removed, as you see here in the previous, as you see it in the previous slide. In this slide, we will refer to or explain the reference period, where, of course, the index is 100, and the reference period of time can be any time. We can calculate it by the whole CPI in different period of time and multiply the result by 100. The next slide, where we see here this graph before the change of the baseline and after change, of course, in the red line. As you see here, the change of the year, the reference year, of course, no change. Just it brings back, of course, the calculation to a new kind of level. Moving ahead to the results or the update results. We will look into the most important results of the update, where, of course, every month we publish the index in terms of the general inflation and the specific inflation. Speaking of the general or public general inflation, of course, the changes to the prices, of course, are selected based on the results of the consumer spending and income. The key inflation is the public one, without items of food, energy, and drinks. As for the commodity inflation, are the physical, such as, for example, long-time commodities, and of course we use the prices of the consumer baskets, of course, where each and every item of the baskets with the long term, such as, for example, cars, and the non-long term, such as, for example, clothes or fashion, which are consumed every day almost. And the service inflation, which are the services provided to individuals, which can be measured, of course, based on the prices, based on the baskets, such as, for example, medical care services. Here we'll be speaking about the general inflation and the physical or the tangible inflation. The tangible and physical inflation is higher than the public one because we focus on the items, on commodities, or are more like on focus, such as, for example, food and drinks, and can be different, of course, when it comes to the calculation of inflation. The average inflation can change from one basket to another basket, while consumer can notice that the inflation can be more and more there. One final thing is that inflation reflects the prices of items and changes, which can be more than 1 year. So this can be changed and can be different. The next slide showcases a good example about the difference between the tangible inflation and the public and the general inflation. We see some examples here, some items. The second one, the yearly change, and then the weight in the consumer basket, and the last one is the contribution to the public generation, or to the inflation. Sorry. the higher the weight is in the consumer basket, the higher the impact and the higher the contribution rate is. For example, jewelry, clocks, watches, as you see here in this example, it has been there up to 18% and the weight is 1.8, so the impact is not so big in comparison, say, with, for example, like frozen meat, even though the increase is little while the weight is there and the contribution is there. The next slide. The graph shows here a good example how different sections can contribute to the general inflation, such as gas, fuel, electricity is the main factor for inflation in comparison with other prices of items, while other items also contributed to the inflation, such as transport, food, drinks, beverage, restaurants, in addition to insurances, healthcare, and personal healthcare, even though the tangible inflation is impacted by the individual behaviors. This slide showcases a good example about the levels of tangible inflation and the public and the general inflation in Canada. It shows that the consumer behaviors impact the tangible inflation and also the expectation of inflation. Consumers normally put weights more and more when it comes to items for the higher prices, while less for the items with less prices. The next slide also shows another examples of the inflation, both tangible and general, in the Euro region, and based on the graph as we see here, it is normally, the consumption, the consumer's feelings and senses is higher than real. Speaking now to speak about the experience of the GSTAT of using AI in the index. Of course, the GSTAT has adopted, of course, the AI to better understand English in order to diversify the resources and better understand AI services when it comes to classification of items and the consumption and consumers items, which has been referred to based on the COCUP 2018. This showcases, of course, the stages of the experience of the GSTAT. Currently, we collect the data based on the field surveys and the logs and records, and the GSTAT, of course, has such a great experience by adopting the scanner. These data are big data coming to the GSTAT, of course, in big quantity. The experience was based on AI in classifying these data and also link it to the COCUP. And it was such a great experience as a primary classification. We hope in the future to publish and generalize of course, the experience across all the basket items, so that it will include all the basket items and others. Speaking of the scanning mechanism, of course, it identifies the items prices and to better understand the inflation and the behaviors. Of course, the scan are used at the cashier points. In order to collect data based on the scanners, we have different points or different ways. Of course, it covers different items and also provides like more time or 5 times in terms of the items collected and the prices, and also the accuracy and efficiency of the data collection weekly. And also it will be like easily to access the data by the retailers. Of course, it was also, we have such good experiences among other countries. In speaking of the experience of scanners at the retailers, we also started the transformation by applying the AI before the definition, where of course we process the big data by using the state-of-the-art technologies, the generative AI and LLL, in order to classify the consumer's basket. And we are looking forward in order to fix the terms by the machine learning for any items, products or services produced, for example, new products such as like rice or soft or fuzzy drinks, for example, so that they can be classified quickly based on the correct classification model and based on the items classified previously. This shows, of course, a simple LLM. We have items, products, such as food products or items. They are classified using the AI all the way up to 2018 with some details and notes to be adaptable for the future classification and also to accommodate more data collection and consideration and classification. We have come to the conclusion. The GSTAT, of course, is working relentlessly in order to develop the consumer prices indices in order to enhance the accuracy, reliability of the data to help decision making. Thank you so much. Your attention is highly appreciated. For further information, you can have more time and spend more time to better understand, of course, by this QR that you see here in the slide. Thanks so much. Your attention is highly appreciated. Mr. Abdulaziz, thank you so much for your seminal information and presentation, which contributed to better understand the inflation of prices. We have some questions. The first one, let's talk about the first question. What are the potential benefits using the AI technologies and the machine or big machine learning models when it comes to the inflation prices? Thank you so much for this question. We have talked about this, of course, in the final point when we spoke about AI technologies. AI will be able to best classify data, of products and services at a higher speed and higher accuracy. Equally important, we do expect that the benefits will include also to process as much big data as possible, much better than manual or man-made data collection and processes. This leads us to the next question. With the e-shopping, how do you think, Mr. Abdulaziz, that the consumer basket will be developed in the future? Well noted. As we've said in the presentation, updating the consumer prices and basket will be or is done, of course, every year, which will play such a good role in order to update and cope up with the consumers' behaviors and shopping patterns and behaviors, as we've seen the change coming into play in terms of the preferences or purchasing and shopping online using delivery applications. If there are any preferences by the consumers, these will be considered, of course, because the weights are updated constantly. Of course, the best applications and methods and technologies are, of course, adopted based on the consumer measurement, consumer prices measurement adopted in 2023. We also are based on the household spending behaviors and also the national spending and indices. Do they include the VAT? The prices? Yes, of course, prices are included in the VAT, and they are compared with the published index every year and every month, so that the prices show the yearly inflation rate every year and every month. Thank you. Mr. Abdulaziz, what's the difference between the key inflation and the general or public inflation? the public or general inflation includes all the consumer basket items 582, reflecting everything, while the key inflation includes the basket excluding food and drink items and power or energy items, to reflect the line of the inflation, other than, of course, the fluctuation of inflation, excluding such items such as energy and food, which gives us like a real image of the inflation. For example, the consumer, for example, the consumer behaviors in Ramadan is different from other months other than Ramadan, for example, in terms of, so energy and food items are excluded because they play such a good role in inflation. Thank you so much, Mr. Abdulaziz. Inflation rates, are they different across the different regions of the Kingdom? Of course they are. Each and every region has its own priorities in spending. Speaking of the big regions or cities, they spend more on rentals, while smaller regions and cities, they spend more on other items. So the ways in each basket item is different, which is from one region to another. Also, economy is different from one region to another region. Some depends on tourism, while others depends on industry. So this gives us like different inflation reflection. For this challenge, of course, the G-Stat, of course, provides better coverage, including 23 cities across 13 regions, while, of course, the index, while, of course, this is very important for decision makers and policy makers across the regions of the Kingdom. Thank you so much, Mr. Abdulaziz. One final question. What are the advantages or benefits that provides for the CPIs when it comes to calculating the consumer prices with the in comparison with the based line? Yeah, we have talked about this, and the CPI depends on fixed weights for a year, a long time, at about 5 years, while moving, of course, chains are based on fixed, which reflects, of course, and reduces the deviations and are considered among the standards adopted by the World Bank. Thank you so much, Mr. Abdulaziz, for this presentation that has really helped us to better understand the inflation index. Thank you so much for the participants. Thank you so much for engagement, contribution to better understand the presentation. Thank you so much for attention. It's highly appreciated. Thank you. Thank you as well.